Out on a calm night, somewhere between land and sea, a light appears that shouldn't be there, and it refuses to go away. Tonight, we follow that light, uncover the 12 haunted ships that still sail the American coast, vessels that vanished, burned, or were retired into museums, yet remain alive in local memory. By haunted, we mean a patchwork of reports and legends, phantom hulls seen in fog, music drifting across marshes, cold spots on museum decks, voices on the wind. These stories come from eyewitnesses, old newspapers, museum staff, and folklore. They do not prove the supernatural, but they do reveal how loss lingers on water. Our route runs from Florida's mangroves to Long Beach's harbor, along the Gulf and Atlantic, into the Great Lakes and down winding southern rivers. If you love sea mysteries, hit like and subscribe. Number 1. The Phantom of the Everglades, Mangrove Channels, late 1800s. Locals along the southern Florida marshes speak of a ghostly schooner that appears on still evenings, slipping between roots and cypress knees. The original vessel, reportedly a smuggler or trader, is said to have been overwhelmed in a sudden storm in the late 19th century. Newspapers from the period mention a schooner lost in a squall. Beyond that, records are thin, and the story deepened into legend as families told it beside bayou fires. "I saw a lantern bobbing between the trees," one Everglades fisherman is said to have told a reporter. "Then hands, pale hands on a wheel, and it vanished into the fog." Witnesses describe a slim silhouette gliding where no channel should allow a boat, accompanied by faint, distant music and the smell of stale rum. At times, observers report a chill that settles across the mangrove flats, even when the air is warm, a sudden, inexplicable cold that raises gooseflesh along the waterline. Scholars and skeptics point to practical causes: swamp gas, mirages on humid nights, and the human tendency to shape an unclear outline into a story. The Everglades landscapes change with tides and storms, revealing hulks and debris that might be mistaken for a vessel. Still, the tale endures in local tours and in fishermen's conversations. The idea that something unfinished keeps steering through those narrow channels. Further north, a very different kind of relic sits at port. Number 2. USS Constellation, Baltimore, museum ship, launched mid-19th century. The Constellation is not a phantom in the open sea, but a preserved warship anchored in Baltimore's inner harbor. Launched in the 1850s, she served as a training vessel and later became a museum ship, a place where visitors touch brass rails and learn naval lore. Over decades, staff and guests have shared odd experiences that shade the ship's proud history with a quieter unease. "I heard boots on the quarterdeck when the busker was long gone," a docent reportedly said after an evening program. Others speak of uniforms seen standing in the passageways or of a sadness that settles in the wardroom during certain hours. Accounts collected by volunteers include footsteps echoing in empty berths, voices on recorded audio that resist explanation, and the recurring image of a lone sailor who appears briefly on deck. Some tie those reports to the ship's long service and the many sailors who trained aboard. Others note stories about harsh discipline and a reputed execution of a deserter in the ship's past, an anecdote that, whether true or embellished, colors interpretations of the sightings. Museums keep two stances. They honor the vessel's history and the feelings of those who visit. Investigations using EVP recorders and thermal cameras have produced ambiguous results. A whisper on a tape, a cold patch on a walkthrough, but nothing universally persuasive. For locals, the Constellation is both an anchor of civic pride and a vessel with a quiet underside where memory and architecture meet. From Baltimore, we head east toward a ship whose empty deck once puzzled the world. Number 3. The Mary Celeste, found adrift in the Atlantic, 1872. The Mary Celeste is the maritime riddle that discipline and imagination return to again and again. A brig discovered off the Azores in 1872, seaworthy and under sail, but with no crew anywhere on board. The ship carried personal belongings, supplies, and cargo. Logbooks were found, but crucial entries were missing, and what exactly happened to the people who had sailed her remains unsettled. The case spawned newspaper speculation then and a century of reinterpretation since. Everything was as if they had left to get fresh air, one early account observed. Modern retellings lean on that image. Chairs still set, cups unwashed, a kettle cold on the stove. Sightings tied to the Mary Celeste tend to be atmospheric rather than visual. Sailors off the Atlantic coast describe a feeling of vacancy when passing certain coordinates, a hush on the bridge that prompts superstitious glances at the horizon. Ghost stories sometimes suggest the ship itself repeats a final doomed voyage, a phantom hull materializing to glide through fog, only to fade like breath on glass. Explanations offered by historians range from sudden fits of alcohol-fueled paranoia among the crew, to accidental carbon monoxide from leaking barrels, to mutiny or pirate attack, possibilities that attempt to root the mystery in human choices and natural peril. Over time, the Mary Celeste became more legend than case file, emblematic of the sea's ability to leave questions unanswered. Heading south now, we encounter a different sort of myth, this one festooned with festivals. Number 4. Jose Gaspar's Ghost Galleon, off Florida's Gulf Coast, legendary era unspecified. Jose Gaspar, often called Gasparilla, is the pirate whose name became a Tampa tradition. Whether he existed as told is widely disputed, but the story endures. A black-sailed galleon that appears off the Gulf at night, accompanied by phantom cannon fire and a promise of hidden treasure. The Gasparilla Festival keeps the image alive, a civic celebration born from and feeding the pirate myth. Cannon boomed out of nowhere, the water lit up with lanterns, and then there was only the smell of gunpowder, an old fisherman reportedly recalled after a night that later entered local lore. Here the haunt blends with pageantry. Sightings are often tied to festival lore, to foggy nights when lights from modern boats create illusions, and to the human appetite for treasure stories. Some coastal residents insist on a more supernatural version, a galleon that sails without wind, captained by a figure whose face turns to shadow. Historians caution that Gasparilla's archive is thin and likely embellished, but the tale persists because it answers a communal need for a dramatic coastal legend. We leave that boisterous ghost to the Gulf and cross toward a museum ship bearing wartime scars. Number 5. USS Olympia, Philadelphia Spanish-American War Cruiser. The Olympia, Newport or Philadelphia depending on display rotations, carries gilded history as the flagship of Admiral Dewey at Manila Bay. Now a museum ship, she has drawn stories from visitors and crew. Cold pockets near the engine rooms, the lingering scent of coal and gunpowder, and sensitive guests who say they feel watched in the brig area. A particularly persistent anecdote involves a young sailor who is said to have taken his own life aboard, an image that has been repeated in tours and late-night accounts, even though documentation is disputed or murky. I put my hand on the brass and felt like someone slipped a cold coin into my palm, a night tour guest is reported to have said. Sightings are tied to specific spaces: the sick bay, the brig, and the engine rooms where the ship's mechanical heart once beat. Museum volunteers report EMF spikes during overnight educational programs, and stories from school groups who felt an unexplained quiet descend. Conservators point out that old ships condense sound oddly. A creak in cold metal can sound like a footstep, and ventilation systems can carry voices farther than expected. Whether superstition or sensitivity, or both, visitors walk away convinced some presence remains tied to the Olympia's service. Ahead, the cold waters of the Great Lakes keep another ghostly reputation. Number 6. SS Bannockburn, Lake Superior, vanished 1902. Known in Great Lakes lore as a Flying Dutchman of freshwater, the Bannockburn disappeared in 1902 on a routine voyage and never made port. No distress call survived, and despite search efforts, the wreck remained elusive for many years. The ship's supposed reappearances in fog or on radar screens have fueled phantom sightings among freighter captains who trade stories over radio static. I watched it cut through the fog, a dark shape with no lights. Then it was gone as if it never existed, a freighter mate reportedly said in a small port inn. The Great Lakes present their own brand of menace: sudden squalls, unpredictable currents, and shoals that claim ships without much drama. Some rational accounts point to severe storms and navigational error. Supernatural explanations lean on the trope of doomed vessels repeating a final loop, captains and crews frozen into an endless course. Locals often include the Bannockburn in lighthouse lore and museum displays of maritime tragedy. And divers who search Lake Superior report eerie currents and sudden temperature drops that feed the myth. From inland waters, we turn to a southerner known for fire and music. Number 7. Eliza Battle, Alabama River Steamboat Fire of 1858. The Eliza Battle was a paddle steamer engulfed in flames on an Alabama river in the 19th century. Survivors' accounts and newspaper reports recorded panic and heroism amid a blaze that consumed wood and steam alike. Over time, the image of a ghostly white riverboat appearing on fog-bound nights, lights still burning, and laughter echoing from the pilot house became a fixture of river lore. Out on the bend, the whole boat floated like a white ghost, music spilling downriver, a planter's diary reportedly recorded. Sightings are often auditory as much as visual. Piano music drifting through morning mist, the smell of smoke in otherwise clear air, the sight of lanterns bobbing where currents should be dark. Folklorists note that river communities ritualize loss, commemorations and stories keep memories alive. So the Eliza Battle's continuing presence may be more about cultural memory than the supernatural. Hydrologists and historians point out that low-lying fog can carry sound unnaturally far, making it easy to imagine music where none exists. The river holds its history close. Next, we cross to a rocky island with a winter tale. Number 8. Palatine Light, Princess Augusta, Block Island, Winter Wreck and Looting Legends. Block Island's shoreline knows the bruise of winter wrecks. The Palatine Light story centers on a winter storm and a ship named the Princess Augusta, or a similar vessel in some versions, that came ashore. Some accounts speak of would-be rescuers who later became accused of looting wreckage rather than aiding survivors. Others emphasize a lantern that burns on a dune on certain December nights as if marking an unsettled death. They said lights moved along the beach like hands searching for something lost, an early parish notice reportedly recounted. This entry sits at the uneasy intersection of tragedy and human failing, the wreckage itself, the rumors about salvage and theft, and the cultural punishment of those acts through persistent legend. Historians suggest much of the looting narrative is folkloric, a way communities process shock and grief. Hydrologists and historians point out that low-lying fog can carry sound unnaturally far, making it easy to imagine music where none exists. The river holds its history close. Next, we cross to a rocky island with a winter tale. Number 8. Palatine Light, Princess Augusta, Block Island, Winter Wreck and Looting Legends. Block Island's shoreline knows the bruise of winter wrecks. The Palatine Light story centers on a winter storm and a ship named the Princess Augusta, or a similar vessel in some versions, that came ashore. Some accounts speak of would-be rescuers who later became accused of looting wreckage rather than aiding survivors. Others emphasize a lantern that burns on a dune on certain December nights, as if marking an unsettled death. They said lights moved along the beach like hands searching for something lost, an early parish notice reportedly recounted. This entry sits at the uneasy intersection of tragedy and human failing, the wreckage itself, the rumors about salvage and theft, and the cultural punishment of those acts through persistent legend. Historians suggest much of the looting narrative is folkloric, a way communities process shock and grief. Hydrologists and historians point out that low-lying fog can carry sound unnaturally far, making it easy to imagine music where none exists. The river holds its history close. Next, we cross to a rocky island with a winter tale. Tourists who walk the winter dunes sometimes spot a flicker on a dark bluff and hear stories at local inns. Whether that light is a lantern, a car, or imagination, the tale keeps surfacing in winter lore. From shore to lake again, we find a schooner stilled by white death. Number 9. Erie Board of Trade. Lake Erie, 1830s snowstorm wreck. Named in memory rather than recorded as a single hull, this Lake Erie tale involves a schooner overwhelmed in an 1830s snow squall. Survivors told of frozen men on deck and a ship that later drifted with a pale, shell-like appearance. Modern anglers and ferry operators tell of a row of figures sometimes seen at dawn, blurred and half-formed on the horizon. I thought they were the sunrise, then they weren't, a mate on a small launch is reported to have said. The motif is stark. Crews interrupted at their work, caught by cold and sudden weather. Nautical historians point to the ferocity of Great Lakes storms and to the danger of early 19th century sail technology in winter. Folklore, in turn, amplifies constancy, the idea that the lake keeps replaying the day to warn or to memorialize. Lake Erie's shoals and fog play tricks on optics. Still, these pale sailors remain a familiar element of shoreline tavern tales. We head south to the Outer Banks now, where shipwrecks and disappearances gather in fog. Number 10. Carroll A. Deering, Cape Hatteras, schooner wreck and vanished crew, reported 1921. Along the treacherous stretch known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic, a schooner called the Carroll Deering, or vessels like her, reportedly met an unclear end in the early 20th century. Stories speak of a crew who vanished without a clear record, and of coast watchers hearing voices on the wind that sounded like men calling for help long after storms passed. We heard them calling from the bar, then silence. A keeper of a small station is said to have told a newspaper. Cape Hatteras's shifting sands and unforgiving shoals make accidental groundings common. Explanations for haunt-like phenomena range from acoustic illusions caused by reef echoes to migrant ship parts that wash ashore and fuel the imagination. Local fishermen sometimes see a boat's silhouette aligning with a reef at the edge of a sandbar and then dissolving in the spray. Whether the Carroll A. Deering's crew were victims of nature or something more mysterious, the place keeps their story alive in whispered recollections. We now turn to a carrier whose history is tied to war and rapid transitions. Number 11. USS Hornet, Alameda, World War II carrier and museum. The Hornet is a wartime icon, a carrier that launched aircraft and later became a museum near San Francisco. Staff and visitors report hospital sickbay activity long after formal tours have ended. Footsteps outside the medical bay, figures in period uniforms, voices commenting on long-ago operations. The ship's history, darkened nights at sea, wounded sailors, frantic radio calls, supplies fertile ground for stories. A woman's lullaby came from the corridor, but there was no one there, an overnight program volunteer reportedly remembered, unsettled. Museum guides emphasize that the Hornet is also a place of living memory, where veterans' reunions and educational events keep the past present. Recorded EVPs and night vision footage capture ambiguous sounds and forms that staff interpret in different ways. Some investigators suggest the ship's metallic structure and stars and stripes environment amplify ordinary noises into eerie patterns. Others, including crew families who have toured the carrier, speak of a comfort that is not entirely human, an impression of caretaking, perhaps, that fits with the ship's role as a place where wounded men were tended. From the Pacific, we cross to an ocean liner whose fame makes it the continent's most photographed ghost. Number 12. RMS Queen Mary, Long Beach, retired ocean liner. The Queen Mary's story is cinematic, a 20th century liner that served as transatlantic grandeur and wartime troopship before being retired at Long Beach as a hotel and museum. With a long list of reported encounters, a small girl near the pool, the clank of unseen tools in the engine room, staff who refuse to be alone in certain cabins, the Queen Mary sits at the center of modern maritime haunt lore. He was below deck wiping oil, and then I felt a small hand take mine, a night auditor reportedly told colleagues, referencing the recurring tale of a little girl seen near the pool area. The ship's size and varied history make it a repository for many stories, accidents, wartime deaths, and ordinary human grief. Museum staff carefully document night tour reports and occasionally cite recorded anomalies, but they avoid definitive claims. Instead, the Queen Mary markets history and mystery in equal measure, hosting overnight ghost hunts even as conservators maintain bulkhead and brass. The vessel's engine rooms and crew quarters, places of concentrated labor and strain, are the most reported locations for phenomena. Whether explained by acoustics, suggestion and guided experiences, or something less reducible, the liner's reputation endures as a cultural touchstone for maritime hauntings. We step back from the ledger of reports. Across these 12 stories, a pattern emerges. Some ships are lost in the open water and become symbols of unresolved disappearance. Others sit in port, preserved, where the living and the past brush shoulders. The sea gives us recurring themes: loss and unfinished duty, sailors who never left their posts in legend, repetition and loop, phantom voyages repeated in fog, and the way communities turn disaster into story, keeping memory alive through narrative. Mary Celeste, Queen Mary, and the Hornet often rise to the top of the imagination because they operate at different poles of hauntings.
Mary Celeste occupies the archetype of the unsolved disappearance. It asks a question the sea refuses to answer. Queen Mary and Hornet are museum-stage specters. Their reported phenomena are experienced by witnesses who walk the same decks that sailors once trod, a form of intimacy between past and present. Museum ships offer a social context that both fuels and moderates claims. Staff and visitors alike bring expectation and reverence, and the architecture of the ships, narrow hallways, metal junctions, and old ventilation, provides many natural explanations for strange sounds and cold drafts. The Great Lakes and offshore legends, by contrast, depend more on isolation and the unpredictability of weather. Skeptics and historians offer explanations that are as human as they are technical: optical illusions on fog-laden nights, buoy lights mistaken for lanterns, infrasound and wind creating the sensation of presence, and the way grief becomes a narrative that communities pass down. Investigators find EVPs and thermal anomalies from time to time, but often these are ambiguous and open to interpretation. These reports do not erase tragedy. Many of the ships listed are connected to real loss, and that loss deserves a sober, respectful telling rather than ghoulish flourish. But why do these stories endure? Perhaps because ships are liminal things, built to cross borders and negotiate the edge between land and the vast unknown. An abandoned deck or a preserved mess hall holds a concentration of past labor and emotion. Stories give form to what was once chaotic: an unanswered bell, a list of names, a cargo manifest. Legends comfort or warn. They prompt rituals like festivals, memorials, and museum tours. And in retelling, we keep company with those who were once at sea. So tonight, if you find yourself by a harbor, look for a light where none should be. Imagine a brass rail that holds the warmth of a living hand, a foghorn answering a time before you were born, a piano's single note trailing off into marsh air. Whether these lights are the mind's construction, a trick of nature, or something else entirely, the stories remain valuable, as records of fear, fascination, and the human need to explain loss. Tell us which ship unsettled you most in the comments, and subscribe for more unexplained history. If you've seen a strange light at sea or felt a cold patch on an old museum deck, share it below. These are the voices that keep the legends afloat.